Hello, and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley.
The podcast where real priests talk about pop culture and what we've learned about faith life in the church. We've watched Dibley, now we're watching everything else. I'm Kate.
I'm Ross, and today it's just the two of us talking about Father Brown and creating our own new vicar for a cosy crime drama. Happy hello to you all.
Hello.
We're in our vicarages and you're listening in. We're ready and raring to talk about Father Brown. But we've got some notices for you first. The first notice is that it is but me and Kate today. Alas, Ruthie cannot be with us today. So you have us two talking about Father Brown, and we're going to go proper deep, and we're going to create our own up-to-date, modernised version of a sleuthing priest.
Yeah, we're going to play to our friendship. And
absolutely. We're going to go creative, we're going to go nerdy. Whilst Ruthie's away, the artist will play.
Yeah.
Or the writers will play, whatever we are.
Whatever we are.
But we've got some notices first. So, Kate, what's going on with you at the moment?
So, one of the things that has inspired this conversation is I had my own little cosy mystery in parish the past few weeks. It's probably a bit more bleak than I'm painting it, but we have a porch in one of my churches, and it's one of a few places where the young people of a village, the disenfranchised young people of a village, can safely hang out. You know, it's a shelter, they hang out there. I love that, they feel comfortable there.
Sure, it's important that young people have a safe space.
Unfortunately, there has been a growing issue of vandalism. Oh dear.
No.
It's kind of, they've grown in confidence, and initially just littering, and then there was a little bit of structural damage and tiny little bit of arson, and most recently there were some rather disturbing words carved into the church door. So I discovered this in the middle of a prayer meeting. I meet on Mondays in the porch of the church where I will be taking a service the following Sunday. That's very convoluted, but we were in this church porch, and as we were praying, I just noticed out of the corner of my eye, suddenly drawing into focus, some rather offensive words carved into the door. I sort of thought, okay, I sort of prayed for young people and held them by the grace of God. And then as soon as my co-prayers had left, I went and I took some photos and I scrubbed off all the evidence and all of that. And then I went and reported it to the police online, yada, yada, yada. But the next step, because we've already reported this sort of thing to the police so many times, is I started calling around. And I called the secondary school and just said, we've got this. Can I send you some pictures of the graffiti? See if we can identify who this might be. Went to the local shop and just said, we've had some graffiti. Just if you notice any likely suspects, can you let me know? These are the names which have been carved in. Do any of these sound familiar?
They carved their names.
Yes. So unfortunately, these young people, either they are very good at leaving red herrings by carving names which aren't theirs, or they're a little bit, bless them, unsophisticated.
Wow, you're being very generous.
So also there was a mobile number graffitied as well. So
have you called it? Have you called the number?
I have not. So I'm doing my best now to not be Father Brown and not go any further than informing the school and the shop, because there's part of me that so much wants to ring this number.
Okay, I've been watching Only Murders in the Building, but I also started listening to a new podcast. I don't think I ever finished it, but the podcast was Who Blanked on the Floor at My Wedding. and other crimes. And in that podcast, you've got somebody, two brides had a wedding party on a boat. So it's and somebody.
Oh, so it's a locked room mystery.
Yeah, it's a proper mystery. It's like, well, we know everybody who was on the boat, and so it's got to be one of these people. So
spin-off podcast.
Say again.
Spin-off podcast for us who graffitied the church door.
Absolutely, yeah. Only graffiti in the church porch. So, well, keep us updated on the mystery as it,
Yeah, and I do want to give a little caveat here that I'm not at all necessarily angry at these young people.
No.
I have a great heart for them. I think I'm upset that their disenfranchisement or their kind of teenage angst has resolved itself in this particular way. But I just want them to get the support they need so that they don't feel like they need to act out like that. Which in itself is a very Father Brown thing, to actually want to help people repent and change rather than necessarily get caught up in the legal system.
Well, we'll get on to Father Brown properly in a bit because, I have some thoughts on that. I've got a little notice, which is that I guested on a podcast. I am a supporter of a Dungeons and Dragons podcast called No Small Roles. And I am now a super fan of No Small Roles, and I joined them for their super fan chats where we talk about the latest episodes, our favourite bits, and just have a bit of a love fest, really. Go check out No Small Roles. They're reaching the end of their first campaign, which is 100 episodes. So we're just getting into the 90s now. So there's a lot of content to catch up on if you like Dungeons and Dragons. But it's a really fun group. Beautiful music, excellent storytelling. Do check it out.
I will do.
But those are the notices. Let's dive into Father Brown. We've already established it's a murder mystery. It's kind of cozy. Cate, tell us more.
And it's got a vicar in it.
And it's got a vicar in it, right there in the title. Tell us more.
Yes, because Father Brown is kind of my thing. I've been passionate about Father Brown for many years, and many of my friends look at me oddly when I talk about how Father Brown is, no joke, one of the reasons that I decided that parish ministry might actually be for me. Before then, I had been more on the line of fresh expressions or something chaplaincy or something that wasn't necessarily parish, but it was Father Brown that sold me on the idea of village ministry specifically.
That's so cool.
So for those of you who don't know, Father Brown is a detective series set in the 1950s about a Catholic priest called Father Brown. It's based on a series of short stories written by G.K. Chesterton. And in it, Father Brown, the Catholic priest, cycles around the village in his cassock, and in his day-to-day encounters with members of his parish, discovers and investigates mysteries, often murders. And there's also a whole side conversation about the seal of the confessional and encouraging and kind of balancing out, when someone has confessed to you that they've done a crime, what do you do then? And this very interesting interplay of Father Brown is always very keen to encourage people to confess their sins, not just to him, but to go to the police and seek proper recompense. Yeah. So that's Father Brown, and I think for me, it struck something in my heart. Not necessarily the solving the mysteries part, although that occasionally does become part of parish ministry, as we've already talked about. But there's something about the vicar, for me, it's called Ministry of Presence, and it's a vicar who is around and about and known. And something about going around your village and people knowing you and you knowing them on quite a deep level, and understanding them, so that when something happens, you know whether something's in someone's character or not. I think it's a very idealised, cosy image of village life in England, really. You know, you have the village fetes and competitions and local small art shows and weird local Olympics and lots of cake baking and tea drinking, and the vicar has an interesting relationship with a local lady of the land who kind of, you know, on a very, you know, patronage kind of relationship, and you've got the people around the vicar who's helping them survive and be a person. And so, yeah, I really like Father Brown from that perspective. And what about you? Have you come across Father Brown before, or is it something that you...
It's something new to me. I knew that it existed, but I never really engaged with it before. So it was a brand new experience. We chose an episode that we would watch, and then I ended up watching another one as well. Some of them have got quite churchy, ecclesial names, which is quite fun.
Yes.
So we watched... Yes. Which one did we watch again?
So we watched episode 2 of season 11, which was the Forensic Nun.
That's right, the Forensic Nun. And then I went and watched The Last Supper as well. And I saw there was another one called The Father and the Son and all that kind of thing. It's like, oh, that's kind of fun. And maybe it's just the 2 episodes that I watched, but they did feel very similar in that the person who died was set up to be a really awful person. But then I did feel it felt like it was quite a dark sort of ending to both of them, where the person who has committed the murder, and by all accounts they are justified in the murder because actually the person who died was awful and unpleasant on all accounts. But then all of a sudden the priest, Father Brown, is saying to them, well, you know, someone innocent is going to go to, you know, was going to die for this, so you need to confess your sins and you need to go die. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is an abused woman who is starting a new life for herself. And yes, she's committed a murder, but within the premise of the show, it didn't feel cosy.
Yeah, and there's a little, that particular encounter, which is from the Forensic Nun, a little spiritual abusey, because he talks about her immortal soul as well.
Absolutely.
You know, an innocent person will die and your immortal soul will be lost or condemned or something like that. And so he sort of says, go confess to the police, and yes, you'll get the death penalty, but at least you'll still have your immortal soul. The earlier seasons are a little bit, I think, a bit better than that.
Okay.
I think, so the source material, the short stories by G.K. Chesterton, there's not actually that many of them. So earlier on, they're a little bit closer to the source material, and then the more seasons you have, and you know they're on season 11 now.
Sorry.
I think things get a little bit further from that coziness. I will never forget the very first episode involves the culprit. Sorry, spoiler alert. The culprit is the Church of England priest.
Oh my goodness! What is this anti-Anglican rhetoric?
Yeah, but I think the books focus more on the character of Father Brown, in that he is a sort of interfering, troublesome priest, and his archdeacon or bishop or whatever the structure within Catholicism is, they kind of see him as a troublemaker, and there's a short story I think about him having to travel to meet said higher-ups to justify himself or something or other.
Oh, wow.
And is that the one where he gets caught up in a smuggling ring? But, like...
Amazing.
It's more about the character of Father Brown.
Well, I wonder whether there is something about, as the further they get away from the source material, the more they end up leaning into perhaps unhealthy assumptions or what's the word? Stereotypes of Catholic theology, Catholic priesthood, which is how you end up with this sort of slightly, we need everything tied up at the end, we need a happy ending, but also your immortal soul will suffer if you don't go and hang for the crime you've done.
Which is
there's that that awkward spiritual abuse, which
I mean, it's interesting. There are some episodes where they deal with the theology really well, and that's often when the crime is less serious. Because I mean, unfortunately, the setting is the 1950s, where the death penalty is still around in the UK. But so where it's thievery, for example, and you have the criminal comes into the confessional booth and confesses, and I think I don't know the exact episode, it's been ages since I watched it, but I think it's one where the criminal confesses to Father Brown in confessional, and then most of the episode is Father Brown trying to convince a criminal to come forward. And then there's also an episode which is about a curate who has fallen in love with a woman, and is a discussion about giving up the holy orders in order to get married.
A great or a good.
So, yeah, it's interesting. The problem is Father Brown is no Poirot, and I think if you're thinking about the sort of detective fiction set in that era, and particularly televised detective fiction set in that era, we hold Christie as the standard.
Yeah, we love Agatha.
We love Agatha so much, and Poirot is my boy. Like,
and I think something about Agatha Christie's work means that she isn't afraid to embrace that darkness of what it means to be human. And I don't know that I necessarily found that within the work of the episodes of Father Brown that I watched. It'd be interesting actually to know more, maybe to read more of the original source material, see what Chesterton was writing. But I think there's something very dark about how Agatha Christie writes her stories in a way that perhaps does feel more justified in the justice that is brought about at the end.
I think there's something about with Christie in comparison to Father Brown, which is that Christie is very much a studier of characters. And she paints motivations that really, you feel it. You feel the pain of the characters in a way that... So the episode we watched, which was the Forensic Nun, in which in the kind of premise is that there's a newcomer to a village. She's been there about a year, and she's set up an arts and crafts fair, and it gets publicised in some sort of magazine, which is a national magazine, and she gets very upset by this, and it draws in the person who turns out to be her estranged husband, who she ran away from on their wedding day, because it turns out that he was going to be incredibly controlling and coercive, and he's just a horrible human being, and he was a horrible husband. Said man then gets murdered, and sort of, it's then the unpicking of who the person who gets framed is this nun,
who gets her own spin-off series eventually.
She gets her own spin-off series, and she is very much obviously she didn't do it, and so they're dealing with potentially, they're going to execute someone who is completely innocent because all evidence points to her, which that just doesn't feel right.
And it also, what felt awkward to me, if I'm totally honest, was frankly, surely a nun would be happy to die on behalf of somebody so that they could go free. is there a Christian imperative to letting the oppressed go free at the cost of your own life? And that kind of felt like I was really interested in that conversation, but it didn't seem to be that wasn't there. And Father Brown kind of said, "Well, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to get my friend out." And
there was something about the murderess where I don't know. It just felt like there wasn't much emotion in her, if that makes sense.
She's
like
very
tragic backstory, but to go as far, like the motive for to actually jump to murder, didn't feel like it would make more sense for her to have just disappeared.
Yeah, so just left. Yeah.
Rather than to frame a nun for murder, like that's kind of. There was a bit of a disconnect there that just felt a bit, and also you think, well, surely at some point in logic, because she said, well, no one's going to actually think the nun did it, then that's what justifies me framing the nun. Surely then that then opens speculation to what was essentially a closed room mystery, because there were a very limited number of suspects. Clearly you were going to be suspected. Somebody
would have made the connection.
I did also think the clues were a little bit heavy-handed, like the kind of the note impressions, the letter impressions, which they use pencil to reveal, and yes, we've all done that trick when we were children. It's interesting the police missed that clue. The police are very much painted as incompetent, I think.
Yes, okay, but here's the other thing. Okay, here is the other thing about the whole justice needs to be done. You need to go and hand yourself in to the police. When Father Brown is cracking Sister Boniface out of prison to go and solve a mystery together. It's like, what respect do you have for the law when you're breaking it yourself multiple times throughout a single episode? But it's fine, you're okay.
It's fine because I'm the vicar. And sort of painted as like, this nun, she's a forensic genius. Right?
Yeah.
What a lovely coincidence.
Yeah.
And she says things like, if I only had my laboratory to investigate. And you think, the police should have these sort of things. You should say to just tell the police what you suspect.
Yeah.
Like, tell the police, I think someone might have used a syringe to put poison through the cork.
And they go and they interfere at a crime scene.
They do.
They go to a crime scene. They discover the thing on the notebook and they remove evidence, and then they pretend that we've just turned up.
Yeah.
So it's wild to me, the inconsistencies in what is and what isn't allowed in the realm of justice and the law.
Yeah.
Because actually, sure, murder is a big one. But there is an inconsistency in Father Brown.
And I think for me,
so this is a very funny conversation to be tearing apart the logic of a TV vicar. But I
think for me that's a bit again where they've across the seasons have distorted the character of Father Brown. Where what you start off with is he is present in the investigation because he is there as the spiritual support of the people who are affected. So he's there, he's either a witness, he was at the tea party where someone was murdered, and he was brought in, he was deliberately recruited to be a good character witness, to be a red herring or whatever. And he's part of it because, and he's sort of interviewing the witnesses more as a sort of, because he does have a reason to be there from a spiritual side, right? I think where they jump the gun is when he starts breaking in to, as you said, tear apart the crime scene and remove evidence. That feels like a step beyond the good-hearted meddlesome priest. I love the meddlesome priest aspect of, we're going to find justice and we're going to make sure that justice happens. We're going to make sure that everyone is cared for spiritually in the whole process. But yeah, the whole just being troublesome and disrupting crime scenes and not collaborating with the police. Anyway, that was our character assassination of Father Brown.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about cosy mysteries. We've thrown this around a bit.
We have just torn it apart, but it is because of, it is a genre piece. It sits within the realm of a cosy mystery. And there are a lot of other sort of cosy mysteries out there, often on daytime TV. You've got Shakespeare and Hathaway, which is sort of a cosy mystery set in Stratford-on-Avon.
Rosemary and Thyme.
Rosemary and Thyme, what a classic duo. Yeah, so a lot
two lady gardeners.
Solving murders, off they go.
Off they go.
I guess to some extent Murder, She Wrote as well, to sort of think of something over from America as well. That's sort of cosy. Everything's kind of resolved. There's a lightness and a comic relief element to it all as well.
And on the comedy side, Psych. I don't know if you come across Psych.
I don't know that
another
one.
American detective series, but it's about a guy who he pretends to be psychic, but he's just really well trained as a detective, and it's comedy.
What's interesting is I've got a friend who is a writer and performer, and we were talking, and he shared with me a script for a cozy horror, which isn't something that really exists, and he thinks it's a great gap in our market at the moment to have a sort of a cozy horror series. And in this cozy horror series that the pilot episode that he shared with me to read, the protagonist is a vicar. And my friend Tom is the son of a vicar, so he has some insight into that world and that realm. And it was really interesting to see how he interpreted the TV vicar within a cozy genre. And this was, again, this was an older single priest who is gay and but is drawn into sort of some kind of supernatural goings on in the area through a sidekick who is younger, sort of historian, librarian vibe. So it's sort of beginning to touch onto the supernatural side of faith and spirituality. And, local horror, folk stories, that kind of thing. But again, you also had the funny side characters, like there was either the organist or the parish administrator who's really into tarot cards, and he ends up telling her, don't do tarot cards with the bishop, and the bishop turns up, or that kind of thing. It's like, okay. Or please don't read his palm, or whatever.
Cozy as a genre it feels like it's become, it's kind of in the zeitgeist as like the popular thing at the moment. Like for me, the cozy game genre is something I love. A good cozy game, a little kind of, they're usually farming sims, or they're just cozy life games where you're just going about, there's very little peril, and you just are creating a beautiful world in which you can live and be comfortable.
Well, that's interesting, because you said cozy game, and I was like, oh, okay. And I started thinking of game shows on TV. But actually, I think there is something cozy about shows like Taskmaster.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's an intimacy within that cast. You see them week after week after week, and there's a coziness and a charm and a lightness about it. But that then also makes me think about, I talked earlier about supporting No Small Roles, Dungeons and Dragons podcast. And I also enjoy Critical Role, another Dungeons and Dragons
They're great, mega good.
leading content creator. That's a horrible phrase, really, in some ways. But again, there's these long form shows where where they are kind of trouncing a lot of TV series, which only last for one series and aren't renewed. but that's because people value those intimate relationships that they can come back to week after week after week.
Yeah.
And the stakes might be high, but the coziness makes it okay.
Yeah, it's the familiarity, because of this long form content that you build with the hosts of a podcast or the characters of a long form series of books, or I mean, since you've shouted out a few podcasts, D&D podcasts, I'll just throw out some of mine. I'm a big fan of the McElroy brothers, so I listen to Mabimbam, My Brother and Me, which is a podcast. It's 3 brothers talking each week, and I love it because it's cozy, because it's like having siblings in the room with me, but actually not having to interact with my siblings who I love, who are very far away. Or that they have a D&D podcast as well called The Adventure Zone, which is it's just really nice, and they've got their dad involved in that as well, and that's cozy because they're family playing D&D. And it has quite good storylines as well. But I also listen to Dungeons and Daddies, not a BDSM podcast. It's a D&D podcast.
Very important to put that in.
And again, there's something about the friendships between the players, but also how they develop their characters over this long form content.
I think
Dragon Friends is another one I've been listening to. Again, it's you'll notice for me there's a running theme of the friendships between the hosts of
I
these
wonder
things.
whether one of the things about the cozy genre then is not only is there a really sort of strong friendship and bond of relationship between the protagonists, but also an openness that allows the viewer to build a parasocial relationship where we feel like we're friends with the podcasters, or we're friends with the Dungeon Dragoners, or we're friends with Father Brown, joining him on the mystery, and it's okay, it's okay that he's breaking into a crime scene because we're there with him and we're included. And I wonder whether that parasocial is key to doing a cozy genre well.
Yeah, and I think it's that sense of, I mean, even when we were talking about Christie, and I referred to Poirot as my boy.
My boy Poirot! I was always a Marple girl myself. I love Marple.
But you develop that relationship with the detective, who is that they are yours and they are precious and you love them, and you want them to, and you're on their side. That's what a good cozy detective show does, is you are on the side of the detective, so when they are breaking the rules, you say yes. You go behind the detective. You go behind.
You
the
let them
police
get away
inspector
with
bar.
murder because.
Yeah.
Okay, so having talked about the cozy genre, let's bring Father Brown up to date and create a new cozy crime detective vicar for TV. Kate and I are going to collaborate on creating a new drama, and we're going to pitch it. Well, you can tell us what you think about about what we create.
Okay.
Where are we going to start, Kate?
Yeah, our first question is, who is this vicar? I think we need someone who isn't like the other vicars we often see on TV.
Yeah.
So, I think they need to be something other than cis male. I think, obviously, myself as a young woman, I'd probably lean towards having a young woman, but to be honest,
absolutely. Actually,
cool.
if we're going to name this TV show probably after the protagonist, and really, thus far, there only is the Vicar of Dibley, who is a protagonist female vicar.
I mean, there's also Midwinter of the Spirit, where there was a female vicar that was a horror.
I've not heard of that, though.
I've not heard of that, exactly.
So I think we need to go. We need someone else to contend with to be up there with Geraldine.
With Geraldine. Okay,
Yeah.
we're aiming high here. Okay. How about Reverend Emma? Reverend Emma. And because in honour of the late Dame Maggie Smith, Reverend Emma Smith, maybe.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Rest in peace, Maggie.
Yeah, and we don't see many young clergy on TV. Not since Geraldine have we had a young female clergy person.
Yeah.
So let's make her young, and maybe on the more, maybe on the kind of more non-binary end, maybe. But that may
a little androgynous.
A bit more androgynous, I think would be quite. I think that would differentiate her from Geraldine, because Geraldine is very much.
Do we strive for the greater
a woman?
But
actually, having someone for maybe for her gender is just not really important.
And,
maybe
there are a lot of sort of young female priests who I know who are very competent, but for whom gender and sexuality is something to be played with and to be expressed different from the norm. So I think that is a really important part of the priesthood that hasn't been depicted on television yet. So
maybe she/they pronouns would be quite interesting.
Or maybe we should revisit the name and make her name slightly more.
Slightly more.
Something that could be abbreviated to, like Geraldine could become Jerry, actually. Something like Georgina could become George. Or Joanna could become Joe, or something.
Yeah. Let's put a pin in that and we can come back to that.
Well, I mean, that begins to raise a question, because if we're going to, we've got the Vicar of Dibley, we've got Father Brown, we've got Rev. Is she going to be Mother? Yes, Mother Slay. Or, as it were, will she be Mother? Is it what church tradition is she coming from?
For church tradition, I think just needs to be middle of the road Anglican. I think there's something about, if we're thinking about a cosy mystery setting, we're going into village ministry. Maybe Market Town.
Yes.
And I think to work in village ministry, you just need to be able to do everything at the kitchen sink, really. Because the reality is, unlike Father Brown, unlike Vicar of Dibley, you have many churches. Rather than one.
And I think actually what could be interesting is to have the Market Town element, but with villages around, so that there is a core church, but then she might be called out to one of her villages where there's a mystery. And
actually that opens up a whole load of different stories, because you've essentially got these satellite communities which can be very different. So you can have an incredibly rural farming community, or you could have one which is, this is where a primary school is, and this is a different sort of feel. And I think that's also why I quite like a little bit of a she/they, because there's playing around with to function in the multiplicity of parishes. At least in my experience, you need to be able to roll with the punches. Sometimes
you've got to be very present in the moment.
You got to be present, and you know what they should be called? Vic.
Yes. Okay. I've got I mean, in one of my stories that I've written, some of you may know about a piece of work I've been writing on, but there is Vicar Vicky. She's very not this character, but Vic is a great name, and I actually, I like Vic.
And that's what it could just be called as well, Vic.
Nice.
Because Vic could be Vicar. Because there are people who call me Vicar, but some people just call me Vic as well occasionally.
I love this.
I love it. And I think I quite like the idea of Vic always wearing wellies. I feel like there's something about, particularly with country ministry, you got to have your standout thing.
Well, and we need to see what is it that she's going to be known for visually. So for Vicar of Dibley, it is Dawn French. But for
Dawn
Father
French,
Brown, there is something about the cassock, the bicycle, and the wide-brimmed hat that he wears. For Rev, it's the slightly frazzled hair and more fairly traditional Anglo-Catholic vestments.
But
so for her, it could be wellies,
It could be wellies in a raincoat. I think, again, there's something about very much being... I want that comfort, that sense of being comfortable in the surroundings and fitting in with the surroundings. I mean, Father Brown is very much standing out from the surroundings by being in the cassock, on the bicycle, with the hat. And again, also with Rev is always in clerical blacks, really.
Yeah.
Geraldine less so, but she stands out because of her personality and being one of the first female vicars.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about being just comfortable in your location. I think if something about Vic's character is that she is just comfortable with who she is.
Yeah.
In kind of the gender is
whatever it is that day.
Whatever it is at that time, right? Maybe doesn't worry too much about, very comfortable in the they space, but if people use more feminine pronouns, it's like, okay, that's,
There's something really disarming, I think, about that kind of a character who walks into a situation and will take whatever's thrown at them within their stride.
Yeah.
And I think especially, there are some characters within rural communities and market town communities where they like power and bluster.
Yeah.
But actually having someone who can cut straight through that with a grace and a roll with the punches-ness.
And then a gentle challenge underneath.
Yeah.
And a gentle change. And you could see over the course of a series, people coming to use more, having more understanding of being non-binary and using more they pronouns kind of later on, and seeing that that discovery and that learning, maybe.
I've got a question now, because often in cosy genres, there is a duo. And we've got our protagonist in Vic, and it may well be that it is simply called Vic. It could be sort of Vic and something else, maybe, but I quite like the idea that Vic is the protagonist.
Yeah.
Who is Vic solving mysteries with? And then we'll get on to the mysteries themselves.
Okay, who is Vic solving mysteries with?
I mean, are we going within the church? Is it their verger or their administrator or a curate? Or is it someone from the community who maybe doesn't have faith?
Or a best friend who's moved out and is living with them as a sort of a sanctuary? Because I was thinking maybe you could have a more extreme character. If Vic is the kind of a steady presence and rolling the punches and graceful, actually having that more adjutant nature coming from the companion, assistant, whoever, kind of, and they are a fish out of water, discovering this kind of country life.
Yeah.
But
so
also
some kind of city. I don't. Not a hipster. But I'm kind of thinking Camden Town, where everything is proper urban and proper fashion. Vivienne Westwood, sort of style. Really sort of. I also think like punk queer kind of. Character.
The sort of more anarchist kind of. And you can have that tension between them of the more anarchist nature wanting to be like, why are you okay with people using she instead of they? Why
Let's tear down the establishment. Yeah,
why aren't you fighting back here? Why are you okay with being a representative of the establishment and having that? I quite like that. I think because that is a conversation for a lot of young Christians, particularly in the more queer space, is that balance of being part of the institution but also wanting to tear the institution down.
Well, maybe as well then we need to have somebody who is within the team, maybe not their direct assistant, but somebody who is dyed-in-the-wool institutional Anglican, who, whether that be someone who is like Alice Tinker, who is the verger, or from Rev, the reader, the lay
what about
reader.
a retired priest?
A retired priest could be an interesting idea.
Yeah. Because, retired priests are the gold dust
They really
when
are.
you have multiple parishes. And they can be incredible words of wisdom, but can also be a point of conflict if you are bringing change.
So are we going to cast them as a sort of the old guard, retired male priest who's done it all and
I think would still have words of wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And still be someone who is comfortable, because I think all the conflict still needs to have a sense of coziness about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But just a complete contrast to this person who's come from the city, and sort of very old guard, middle class, cis male, married for 50 years.
I like the idea that they're a widower though.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's mean to like the idea, but I think that would be a strong choice because it frees them up to be a part of the mysteries.
Yes.
And maybe they're finding new life after after retirement, but also after their marriage has ended.
Yeah, and you could have sort of their satellite characters are their daughter who blusters in occasionally from Gloucester or whatever, to sort out Dad's life, make sure the fridge is stocked, and all those sort of things. It's like, why have you been out solving mysteries?
Well, let's get into the mysteries then,
okay.
because most cozy mysteries tend to be murder mysteries. Although I really enjoyed watching Beyond Paradise, which is a spin-off from Death in Paradise.
Yeah.
Set in Devon on the south coast, or Dorset. Devon or Dorset. Either way, gorgeous south coast. But they're not all murders. Rarely are they murders, in fact. It's they're exploring things like arson or thefts in the area. So,
or there was one which was about fake UFO circles or something.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And I wonder, within our benefice of churches, what is Vic solving, and what does that look like in her ministry? I suppose. Why is she involved?
Yeah. So you have to have an episode called The Lost Sheep.
Yes. Oh, it could be a whole series just based on parables. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it has to be about feuding farmers who are like so one from one of the flocks, like some prize competition lamb or something has gone missing, or ram, or like
the prize
has gone missing, and is blaming their main competitor, who maybe there's been some sort of there's some sheep show, so there's so the local county show is coming up, and every year these two farmers have like a really kind of strong rivalry about who has best sheep in show, and this one nearly always wins with their prize ewe or whatever, and it goes missing, and so you got prime suspect, which is the rival, and you got to work out who is sabotaging, and obviously it can't actually be the rival. It's got to be someone else.
Well, I mean, interestingly, we've, having set up the assistants as well, they could be like a very local animal rights group, which is trying to, and slightly anarchist kind of side to it. There could also be sheep rustlers in the area or whatever who are interfering.
So that's sort of one mystery. I think another needs to start with, just because this is something you do come across in ministry, a vague request to meet from someone.
Ooh, okay.
When you get the text that says, "Hi Vicar, can we meet? Can I come and see you next week?" With no details about why they need to see you, or what they want to talk about, which then sends me at least into an anxiety spiral of, oh my goodness, what have I done wrong? But it could be that, this message has been sent and then the person, instead of turning up, gets framed for something. Or themselves has gone missing. Or which is then that little, how does the vicar get involved? The vicar is part of the county show. Maybe they are part of the judging panel or whatever, or there to present the rosettes. And the vicar has been involved because they got a text message. And, the police are saying, if anyone has any information about this person who's gone missing. And the vicar comes forward and says, I got this mysterious message from them last week.
I think there's something about Vic is that she would have an incredible pastoral ministry, which allows her to just sort of knock on the door and basically walk into someone's house and sit down, have a cup of tea, and that be normal. And then, so that needs to be a huge part of her ministry in being able to do that. But I think it's also being so embedded within the life of the community. Actually, she would know people through the school. She would know people from collective worship and on the school gates. She would know people from these various committees and festivals and feasts and whatnot. So she's already embedded, trusted, and
yes. So it's not Vic is not the outsider.
No.
Investigating. It's almost like maybe this assistant, the one from London, the anarchist punk type, they are often one maybe who is drawing in to the mystery.
They've
and
heard
Vic says,
something.
"Oh yes, no, I know who that is." I was just having tea with their mum. And so maybe it's more often than not, it's the two companions, the two assistants, who are drawing Vic in for different reasons. So maybe the retired priest is also on parish council, or something as well. So you get that
different from the PCC. I just want to
which
note
is different from the PCC. And you won't often find retired clergy on PCCs.
No, you wouldn't. That wouldn't be generally. That wouldn't be deemed appropriate.
So, but I think you kind of have those kind of different avenues into the mystery, and Vic is there and kind of solving things. Not necessarily in a very. I quite like the idea of the actual investigating is the companions maybe, and actually Vic just very quietly goes about talking to people. And just works it out.
Well, there's like that. I binged Ludwig, which is a new drama on BBC, and basically the way that David Mitchell's character solves mysteries is by sheer logic, and actually very little to do with motive, very little to do with why anybody would commit this kind of murder. It's all done that's the only possible logical rationale. And in many ways with Vic, you've got the opposite. Everyone else is trying to work out how it was done and who did it, when actually she just talks to people. And it's through those conversations that she discovers and brings about a sense of justice and whatever.
So okay, here's a thing. Like, I think what I think could be like the feature of what makes this stand out from others is, so each episode, a lot of the investigating is done by these two kind of contrasting characters of the... We need to give them names.
Let's go with... oh, God. I tell you what. Let's go... The punk can be Nat.
Mm-hmm.
And the retired priest can be... well, let's go with Ruthie. Ruthie, you're retired. Congratulations.
I thought we said retired priest was going to be male, though.
Oh, we did say that, didn't we?
What about Simeon?
Oh, I like the biblical old man.
Yeah.
You let your servant depart in peace kind of vibes.
Yeah. So sort of Nat and Simeon. So Nat and Simeon, I think, are often the ones in the episode who we're following a lot of. And we kind of get, Vic is around and we see it, but it's at the end where we kind of have a denouement. And Vic kind of says, oh, and this is how I found out. And we get a montage of Vic talking to different people that we maybe saw glimpses of throughout the episode. But Vic says, oh, yes, so I talked to so-and-so. And then I went to go and talk to so-and-so. And then I went to talk to so-and-so. And this is how I discovered that.
I don't know. I see where you're thinking. And I like your thinking. But I think that for a show called Vic, we want to follow Vic more. I think what we want to see is Nat and Simeon going off and doing their thing.
Yeah.
Almost just then leaving Vic behind, and then Vic just takes herself off to a cafe and chats with the mother of the deceased or whatever.
Yeah.
And we see those gentle conversations within the franticness of Nat and Simeon. And then she is the one who will pull people together, and at the end say, sort of unpack it in a sort of...
let's talk it out.
Yeah.
Let's mediate this discussion. And actually, what would be really interesting is if you often had Nat and Simeon investigating different sides. So especially if we're keeping away from actual crimes,
let's go with sheep rustling. Let's go back to the lost sheep.
Yeah, let's go with lost sheep and mysterious text. Someone who's just run off for a bit, whatever, and keeping away from more extreme crimes. And so you've got, let's say we're on lost sheep. So you have Simeon, who's on the side of the person whose sheep has been stolen, who's the kind of stalwart, maybe a bit snobbish kind of lord of the land farmer who maybe doesn't actually do any of his own, who doesn't do any of his own farming. So actually, the person who's taken the sheep is the person who actually cares for the sheep and has taken them off, to have a better life.
Oh, I like that.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
I really like the idea that you would send Nat to one of the one thread, Simeon would follow another thread, whilst then Vic goes direct to the underdog, the people who would be overlooked, and so well, actually, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And actually, it could almost be, I mean, you don't want to set up too much of a pattern, but in some ways she goes to the person who is perhaps in our sheep story, she goes straight to the person that she knows cares about the sheep a lot. And it turns out to be them at the end. But she goes straight to them. And not knowing that, and that not being, uncovered then, but she meets with them and says, so how are you? Because I know how much you care for your sheep. Whilst the others are like, well, it must be the landowner. I'm going to go and have a word. And they're trying to say,
And maybe occasionally, kind of, you also get her role is trying to help the person come forward. So maybe in occasional episodes you have Vic discovering very early on who the culprit is, and then helping them come forward. Or if the one with the text where someone's disappeared, but Vic's actually had a text from that person. arranging to meet, and she meets them and is unpicking kind of why this person felt that they had to run away because they were running away from a conflict maybe, and kind of helping them work out how to resolve that conflict or feel confident in that. This stuff just sounds so
exciting.
Cozy.
Yeah, we should make this a thing.
We should actually make this a thing.
We'll you can message us with what kind of a TV vicar you would create for a cozy mystery, or let us know if you have any ideas for any mysteries that our Vic, with their assistants, Nat and Simeon, or other names. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
That was a very different episode, I feel, to what we usually do. I think we quite enjoyed it.
We had a lot of fun.
Creatives we are. Not that Ruthie isn't creative, but creative in a different way, maybe.
We are storytelling nerds.
We are storytelling nerds.
Yeah.
And if we go back to the question, is being a vicar like being Father Brown? Not really. I think there's aspects of building relationships in parish and being present where you are. But
I think most vicars would quite like the time to be able to do puzzles and things like Father Brown does.
I dream of being able to cycle around a single village.
Sure.
Uncovering puzzles. Wouldn't that be glorious?
One day, maybe.
One day, maybe. If you'd like us to do something like this again, where we try to pitch something, do let us know. We had fun.
Well, God bless you, everybody. Thank you for listening in, and have fun solving whatever mysteries you have in your life. Great is the mystery of faith.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Nat for editing our ramblings.
Any opinions expressed are our own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Church of England or any other organisation with which we are affiliated.
If you like our podcast, leave us a review, follow us on social media and share it with your friends. And, as always, bless you for listening.
What did the Vicar of Dibley call Father Brown when he was caught sleepwalking?
Ooh. I don't know.
A Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic.
Oh, that's a good one.
I tried to make it anyway.
I liked it. I was just, you've tailored one specifically for us. That's so good.